Hey everybody, welcome to the Bridge the Gap DFS podcast. Happy New Year to everybody. We took some time off for the holidays. We're back at it, and we're just really fired up for all the support that you guys showed us last year. This started out as just doing a couple YouTube videos. Now we're expanding into education, getting to learn other players, and just really focusing on creating timeless content. So thank you for everybody that supported us. Very excited about our guest today. He is one of the best players in the game today. He's been doing it a long time. He's really consistent. You get an opportunity to chase these guys in contests, and then you get a chance to meet him, and I just really love telling people's journey. So joining us today on our podcast is Brian Hooper, Bric75. Brian, how you doing, buddy?
Good. Thanks for having me.
Yeah, my pleasure, man. It's really exciting. I think when you dropped your content, I haven't seen people clamor for content like that since Manny Laura started his Twitch stream. So how's that going for you?
Not bad. I don't really I'm not super consistent with it. It's not my priority. So, I don't even know what to compare it to. So I don't know if I'm doing a good job or a bad job, really. I'm just, I'm really doing it for fun and, for a few other reasons, but.
Well, I
think it's going well.
I'm sure you're doing a great job.
All right.
I checked this morning. The first video that you did is over 2,000 views. I mean, that's incredible. That's, you're reaching the right people. And I think your message is hitting, it's resonating with a lot of us, and it's providing some clarity on some issues that can be confusing for a lot of us. And I think one of the things that is really outstanding about your content is taking stuff that is very complicated and presenting it in a very simple manner. So talk to us about why start the channel now, why start giving some information, insider trading to the public that is essentially, potentially your competition.
Well, I've been thinking about it for a while, and it's kind of a downer if you want to really know why. This is a downer. I'm not trying to down anybody, but one of my buddies committed suicide about a year ago.
Oh, I'm so sorry to hear that.
And it's all right. It's been a year, and I was just thinking about him about a month ago, and I started Googling his name, and there was like nothing online about him. And I was like, I don't want to go out that way. You know what I mean? And I'm like, I'm just going to put myself out there. And I didn't do it. Another reason why is because I didn't do it I played poker for a living.
Okay.
And before Black Friday. And I didn't get involved in the community, like basically at all. I had a couple poker friends, barely. And I kind of always regretted it because having like a little community in the gambling world can help you in so many different ways, right? Like when you're on a downswing or bouncing ideas off of, especially in poker back in those days, where it was just, there was not a lot of material and everyone was shooting from the hip trying to figure it out. And the game was just getting harder and harder, quicker and quicker. And to have people in your group could just help you so much. And I didn't do that. And so I kind of regretted that. And just something else to I love YouTube, and I wanted to know about the analytics, that they have. I'm, an analytics guy, and I wanted to see what all the stats were behind the scenes, and and I'm not monetized, but I'm going to do it anyways. Cause I just want to see okay, how much money are these people making? And, it's just interesting, so there was a bunch of reasons, but yeah, that kind of sums it all up.
Well, I think that's really noble of you. And I think, being able to make an impact, I think as we progress in our lives, having that sense of community, being able to give back, I know that helps me out a ton. I've struggled with depression and anxiety for most of my waking adult life. I see a psychologist on a regular basis. I've been on medication in the past. So mental health is something that I take very seriously. So I can definitely relate to, connecting with others, because I'm coming out of the worst downswing I've ever been through. And there were days where it's like, my life is awesome, but I can't think of anything but how much this sucks. And if it weren't for, my family system and my wife and, my friends in the DFS community, I think I'd be zapped. I don't know if I would have been able to keep going. I might have just, packed up and stopped playing. It was really difficult.
Yeah, I believe it. I kind of got a lot of that out of my system in playing poker for a living for 7 years. But when I first started, I had a roommate at that time, and he could tell you that I would have some bad days. He came home once, and the couch was destroyed. I'm not even kidding. This is a long time ago. I did it with a keyboard. It was like his wood couch. I just smashed the envelope and shit, and then smashed the arm off, and it punctured. I punctured a hole through the keyboard, and I just left it there. So he came home, the couch was smashed, the keyboard's hanging with a hole in the middle of it. He's like, had a bad day? I'm like, yeah.
I just imagine that would be something like if you were able to take a picture of it and where you're at now in your life, just have it framed on the wall of.
Awesome. That would be so. I would love it. I wasn't happy that day, but yeah.
I try.
Go.
No, go ahead.
Yeah, one of the things about the difference between poker and DFS that I've noticed about myself, anyways, is I hated those guys. Like, I hated their screen names. I still remember a lot of them, and I hate those. I would learn to hate them, and then whenever I'd see them on TV or just when they did a poker video, I'm like, I'm losing to this guy. This is who I'm losing to. Like, you idiot! How do you lose to these guys? Some of them I didn't hate, and the more I saw them on online or something like that, it would get over it. But with DFS, I don't really have that. I think I'm less competitive on an individual level like that. Like, I know they don't have control over whether they take 5th or 7th, in taking, I'm sorry, 1st or 7th. And 1st is everything. That's what gets you on the rankings, gets you all the money. I'm still, some of the names kind of piss me off. I'm not going to lie. I still have a little bit of that. Like, I make up names for them, like I don't call them by their real name in my head. I make like little nicknames up for them. But it's not as bad, even though the swings are, I would say, 10 times as much.
So I want to get into that. This is all just perfect. This is all I want to get into. But before we get into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself, where you're from, where you grew up, where you went to high school, after high school, what you did, and then talk to us about the path that led you from what you did prior to poker to DFS.
Okay. I grew up in Lamont, Illinois, which is a suburb of Chicago. It's about, 45 minutes, 55 minutes, depending on traffic, outside of Chicago. And I lived there my whole life until college. And I didn't want to go to college. I hated school. But that was right around the time sports management degrees were getting popular.
Awesome.
And I was like, okay, well, if I'm going to have to get this thing to make my mom happy and get a real job, I guess I'll do this. And I was really into sabermetrics at the time. I was, always a big baseball fan, and I loved Billy Beane and the Oakland A's. I had all the Bill James almanacs and stuff like that. And I was making like my own little models. I guess I'm a super dork, but I was making like minor league models and stuff like that to see if the A's would pick. Awesome. And I'm like, I don't know anyone in sports, and I'm not going to get a job. I know how hard. I'm not like, I'm not naive and like, oh, I'm going to be assistant GM. Like you have to get in somehow. And I figured a sports management degree with analytics was going to be, and I wasn't going to play in college or the pros or anything. So it's like, and they usually hired, especially back then, they were only hiring ex-athletes. So I'm like, well, this is my best shot. So I went to Northern Illinois and got a degree there. And from there, I worked in minor league baseball around the city. There's a bunch of minor league teams here in Illinois, and I worked for 2 of them. And they're both, one of them's defunct now, and it was in Joliet. They were the Joliet Jackhammers at the time, and now I think they're called the Joliet Slammers, and they're in a different league under different ownership. And another team that was the Cook County Cheetahs, and they were sold like the first week I was hired, and they changed their name, and they pay you. I saw a post. Did you see this post on Twitter? It seems like everyone in the DFS world's commenting on the $30,000 a year job at Pro Football Focus.
No, I didn't
see that.
No, I didn't see it.
Somebody posted, there's Pro Football Focus is offering a $30,000 $30K a year job. What a joke. And then Dan Back and a lot of the people in the industry are like, I started with a $5,000 a year job. And Tommy G's like, I started for free driving, uphill in the snow. So my first job was free as well. And in minor league baseball, you do everything, right? Which is a pretty good learning experience. You work in the front office, you work in ticket sales, you work on the field if they need you, you're pulling the tarp. And I worked in independent league ball, which is what I wanted, actually, because independent league ball is not associated directly with the MLB, so you get to pick your own players.
Awesome.
So I wanted to, weasel my way into whoever's picking the players, and then be like, hey, have you ever heard of Bill James? Hey. And I kind of did. The first GM offered me a job to assist after my internship. He offered me a job to assist the coach in picking players after I kind of convinced him.
Awesome.
He was, a pretty level-headed guy, and it just fell apart, and he couldn't put the money together or something. I don't know. But anyways, I moved on from that one, and I told this story on Alex Baker's On the Contrary, Osmos On the Contrary. My next job was a paid job. I can't remember how much we made. It was like $15,000 plus commission, and then they stiffed us on the commission too, like half of it. And you're working during the season. You're working 12 hours a day, sometimes 13 days in a row, depending on how long the homestand is.
Wow.
And you're doing everything. Like if there's like a picnic, like outside the stadium, someone orders to have a picnic with a tent and food outside, and then they come in and watch the game. You're moving 100 tables. you and your intern, my buddy, who was, thank God I had an intern from Northern too, so that helped. It was a pain. It was the pain in the ass, and so I got a meeting with the GM owner, because he knows I wanted to be involved in picking the players and everything. And he was a professional baseball player. And he was an interesting fellow, not a Bill James type of guy. Anyway, so we sit down and I tell him, I go over some like simple sabermetrics tools, that like how you could judge wins based on runs and stuff like that. And like he cuts me off and he goes, Brian. He goes, Brian, you know how you tell whether a guy's a baseball player or not? His chin, the shape of his chin. I'm not even joking. And I was like, I have no chance with this guy. Like, there's no way my Excel sheets are gonna. I'm not sure this guy can read, much less. And what's that called? Phrenology, like the study of the brain they used to do in the early 1900s. That was his, and he was like a head scout for the Cleveland Indians for a decade or something. And I'm like, and so after that, like right around there, I've always been interested in gambling. When I was a kid, I would read all the blackjack books before I turned 18, because you could go to the Indian casinos at 18. So I would like practice card counting when I was 17 and just buy a whole bunch of decks. And I read everything. Blackjack Attack was one of my favorite ones. And I would combine the strategies from oh my God, I can't remember the names. This is so long ago of all the. I read everything they had, and then me and my buddies would drive up to the local casinos and gamble. And I counted cards for fun for extra cash. Until I turned 21, and then I went to one of the local casinos and they had poker there, And I was like, okay. And I played poker with my buddies, but never in the casino. Obviously, I wasn't old enough. And I started playing there. And then in the summers in college, I would just go to the boats and stay there like 8 hours a day during the day and gamble playing poker for money. And then until I graduated, I was also a guitar teacher during college too. So that's how I kind of made money through college. And but back to the minor league baseball. And then so after I had that meeting with him, and then it's like, and major league teams don't really respect minor league team experience. So for anyone out there who is trying to get a job. Like, if you're like, I worked 5 years for this minor league team, they're like, we don't care. We don't care at all. Who's your dad? Is your dad related to anybody? Anything in the entertainment industry, you're going to be working for peanuts. And there's going to be a million people who will work for less peanuts than you, and so just expect that to happen. And but that, I'm like, okay, that's enough. And online poker was really picking up. And I quit my job, not specifically to play poker, but that's what I ended up doing within like 2 or 3 months. And I'm like, God, I can make 15 grand is what I made last year. Of course I can make more than that doing this. And I did until the government got involved. It was going pretty well, but that's the story up until then.
So tell me about the day or the time when you hear about DFS and you start getting curious about it and going down that path.
Yeah, there was 2 moments that I can remember. That's a good question. One was my girlfriend at the time, her brother came up to me. So this is after Black Friday, so after 2011.
Okay.
Black Friday's when the government shut down poker, just for those who don't know. And he comes up to me and he goes, check this out. I'm in 360th place or something. I didn't really even know what DFS was. I was kind of vaguely familiar with it. And he was 360 place out of 100,000 people or something. It was pretty, and he only had one entry, but actually I think there was like a couple 100,000. It was a big football one. And I was like I'm like, I didn't know 200,000 people play this. But like the wheels started spinning in my head. I'm like, there's no way, this is going to sound cocky, but like, there's no way 200,000 people that I can't beat them. Like, that's enough where the player pool's large enough where I'm crazy enough where I'm going to put in the time that they're not gonna, and I already have gambling experience. And so I'm like, oh man. And that's when it started, but I didn't do anything with it. And then I saw, but I started telling my buddies who were more into sports than I was, because like my sports fandom is kind of like, I was crazy with it when I was, as a kid up until my early 20s. My friends, I'm like, listen, I guarantee you guys can make money at this. You just got to be smart about it. Why don't you guys do it? I'm busy. Like, I have a job now, and like, someone should do this. I told like 5 or 6 of my friends who I know were smart enough and to do it, and no one picked up on it. And then I saw, I think it was the final nail in the coffin. I think was when A.E. Jones won the Millie. I'm like, wait, that's A.E. Jones from poker. Like, I knew him a little bit. Like, we talked on Skype a few times, and we weren't buddies or anything. But I'm like, he's doing this now? Like that? Okay. And then I started looking in, and there was like Ryan Dowd was another poker player who went over, and I'm like, okay, I gotta take this more seriously. And then I found out that you could play every level, every entry fee at once. And I'm like, okay, that's your edge, because in poker you could only play. I was pretty good, and I was probably maxed out at about 12 tables at once. Okay. And there was some guys who could do 20 or 40, but I don't even know if they were profitable. Maybe in like 2007 they could be profitable with that, but like eventually got too hard. So I'm like, it's like, imagine being a pretty good poker player, but you get to play all the tables. Like, you would make a fortune. So I'm like, okay, I gotta look into this. Those were probably the things that pushed me over the edge. And I did. And I when I started, I was like, this isn't for fun. Like I'm going to dominate, or I'm not going to do this. I'm going to spend every waking moment trying to beat this, or I'm not going to do it. So once I made up my mind, then I just put a lot of effort into it.
So about what time, so this is after 2011, so are we talking about 2012, 2013? I think it was around 2013 that A. Jones won that tournament.
So, yeah.
Okay.
2013 sounds about right, yeah.
So tell me about the day or the time when you realized I'm good at this.
3 days ago. I'm not even kidding. Like probably like 6 months ago. It was a little hard. It was a little harder than I thought it was going to be. But not. I mean, what's good? What's good? Like, better than the average person. Pretty early on, I figured, okay, I think I'm doing something better than what the other guys are doing. Another thing is I didn't backtest any of my models or anything, right? I really gambled with it live.
Okay.
I'd be like, here's an idea. Let's see how I can implement it. Throw some money on. Let's do it. Which you probably shouldn't do, but I'm kind of glad I did, because the game, it gets harder, and by the time you figure out a strategy, you might be passed up already. So I'm kind of, obviously in hindsight it worked out, but yeah, that was the conscious strategy during the whole time.
So what were some of the steps that led you to more consistency? Because that is one of the things that I'm experiencing right now, where you have a profitable season and you show up and you expect to just print money the next season, and things change on you. And I think it can take most players one of two directions. Either you adapt or you just start complaining and become a Twitter troll, essentially. So what are some of the steps that led to you to getting more consistent in what you do to adapt now currently?
I think just the way I am is the way I'm naturally adapt, because I'm constantly adjusting my process all the time, maybe to my detriment sometimes. So like, even if I win $100,000, I update my models and my ownership projections and stuff like that, and like tweak them a little bit and see if I can get a little more accurate or implement an idea. Like I'm constantly tweaking it. Not huge, not since the beginning. Am I changing it? Like, so here's a little story. When I first started, I made this spreadsheet that was so monstrous that it lagged my computer, right? My computer couldn't handle this stupid spreadsheet I was making. And so my brothers are computer guys, and some of our friends are computer guys. And I emailed it to one of our friends, and he's like been a family friend for years, so I could trust him. And I sent it to him, and he responds like, "Holy spreadsheet." And I said, "I know it's a little big." I'm like, "Just do me a favor and don't share this with anybody," right? And I was really concerned with it getting out there. And like that spreadsheet, if I had it right now, I would just give it to the world. I don't care. It's completely worthless. Right? And that was, months and months of work building this spreadsheet that was slowed down my entire computer. It was so big. And now my spreadsheet is pretty streamlined. Like, I really don't have a lot of problems with it. You find out what matters. But yeah, and so like the point of that story is more like I'm constantly tweaking. And actually that story is another reason why I kind of started doing videos too. It's like, I don't think if I give out enough free information, can I create a few monsters that I probably don't want in the DFS world? Yeah, that might happen. I don't want them going up and competing in the high stakes games and beating me. But I think most people won't get, won't become monsters out of it. It'll just help them a little bit. And you know what? Honestly, they'll think of things that I don't too. Cause it's not like I go, here's exactly what I do. Here's my info. Here's my CSV. So you still got to you still got to do the legwork. And also, in my opinion, that's the best way to do it, is you don't want to be spoon-fed. Spoon-fed is no way to learn how to gamble in any gambling venture. You gotta figure it out yourself, because the environment changes all the time too. In any of these environments, they change all the time. So if you can't do it yourself, you're just screwing yourself. And the guy who's spoon feeding, and what if they're wrong, or what if eventually they're wrong?
Well, it's funny you say that, because one of the things that I tried to focus on when I first started putting out content is teaching people how to study for the test and not give them the answers for the test. And I also wanted to pay it forward. Manny Laura, when he started his stream, I felt like I had all of the puzzle pieces, but I didn't know how to put them together. And then things started clicking a lot for me when I started watching his stream. And so that was one of the reasons I wanted to do, is kind of pay it forward to newer players, beginning players, show them some of the mistakes that I made. And I did some private coaching calls just for free, just for fun, just to start learning more about people in the community. And right away, within 5 minutes, you can tell who's going to do well and who's not going to. It's the guys that are like, dude, it doesn't matter how much I suck at this. I just love the process. And it's like, this guy's going to make it. And then there's one guy, baseball season, I literally told him exactly everything to do. And I said, but you got to do it for the next month to really see how it works. He gave up after 3 days. And since I get messages from handfuls of people, hey, have you worked with so-and-so? Because they just hit me up. I'm like, great guy, but doesn't want to listen. So I hear what you're saying about, even if you gave people the answers, if you can't adapt, it's gonna change on you. The NBA strategy stuff that I've put out this season, I don't even know if it's any good anymore, because that's what I used for 2 years, and now I'm having to completely revamp my NBA approach. So it can be very difficult. And I want to touch back on something that you mentioned in the beginning, where you said that the swings are much crazier with DFS. I think that a lot of people would be surprised by that, myself included. So can you talk to us a little bit between the differences in swings, and then get into, as comfortable as you are with the worst swings that you've been through and what you've kind of done to battle back? Because I think so much of DFS is mental, and that can be very challenging when things aren't going well, to feel like a failure or feel like you're not on the right path when you could be super close to the breakthrough if you just keep going.
Yeah. So let's see, which one should I tackle first there? The worst swing I had was 2 years ago in football, and I think it was like 600,000 in three months. And most of the swings I feel like that I had were my own fault, where I just don't think I was good enough and I was playing too high stakes. I jumped in too quick because my bankroll could handle it, and I was good in other sports. And last year in basketball, I probably had some bad ones. I think I ended up even on the season, and then I've completely changed my strategy this year, and knock on wood, crushing it. But the football this year, here's a good example. So and then bring it to the first part of your question with the difference between poker and DFS. And I should stress, in poker, I was a cash game player, not a tournament player. Okay. I would play tournaments, but my main livelihood was based off of cash games,
Gotcha.
Like 9 to 5, whenever I would start. So the swings are a lot less in cash game poker. But you would need, if you had like 50 buy-ins, and also this is pre-Black Friday, those games are probably really hard now, so I don't know what these guys are doing nowadays, but this is back in the day. If you had like 50 buy-ins and you're a good player, you should never go broke, or very close to it back then. Now you're putting in, 50 buy-ins a day, first of all, to play tournament poker, tournament GPP DFS. So you're gambling a lot more, just to max enter. I mean, now I know it's relational to your entire bankroll, but you're gambling a lot more, and it's all, and it's in the majority of it's tournament based, right? You can't even get down unless you want to play Empire Maker and a couple other guys at the top of their sport. You can't even get down much more than like 10 grand on DraftKings, even the biggest site. So I max out everything they have on Fantasy Draft and Yahoo. And here, I'll tell you right now. So on Yahoo, I have I have football in there already, but I think it's like $5,000 right now on Yahoo, and that's with playing everything they have, right? And Fantasy Draft's less than that. It's like $3,000 or something like that. And so let me bring you back up here. Okay. And so, but in a tournament, you're going to put down. It depends on who you are, and obviously what your bankroll is. 30,000 on one site. So you're gambling more in a higher risk environment. Only 20% is going to be paid out, and it's paid out top heavy. So a good example is this year, three or 4 weeks ago in football for me, the way I arrange, I make 150 lineups, and then I arrange them, based on certain criteria, and then stick them in some of the higher stakes games as well. And, if I just rearrange that, my football season is huge. I bank a gigantic tournament, right, in just 1 week. You only get 17 shots at it anyways. And so I look like a genius. So like if you bank a tournament, and this is kind of what my last video or 2 videos was about whether you should do an all or nothing GPP strategy, first or last. I saw that someone hashtagged that on Twitter and DFS. And I get the idea that it's a top heavy game that they put out there. That's the product that they're providing, but you still want to get back a decent amount of your investment each slate. And the way I show it in the video is the more you get back, the longer you're giving yourself to bank a tournament. So like you want to have 200 times before you have to bank a tournament, as opposed to if you have a literal all or nothing strategy. In my video anyways, you're going to need to bank one in every 67, which is super tough, right? I don't know who's doing that. So, I mean, the more equity you could get back, the less swingy you're going to be. I don't think people have any control over whether they finish first or seventh between those. I don't think you can predict who's going to go off as much as people think they can predict. And so if you are, consciously sacrificing equity to play this first or last game, I think you can make a mistake. Again, I'm not trying to, just say that idea has no merit at all. It definitely has some idea. It's a balance is all I'm saying. How about that? It's a balance is what I'm saying. So like if you played let's say I guaranteed you could win a tournament 1 in 67 times. So in one of those, you're going to win, but in all the rest, you're going to lose. Right? So you're going to win one for sure. I am the DFS god, and I grant this wish to you. You're going to win one tournament in 67, but you can't win any of the others. What would your playing style be in those other 67? They would be to try to get back as much as humanly possible, because you're not going to win it, right? So you want all your winnings are going to be from those tournaments, right? Because the bank just breaks you even. The bank in 1 in 67 just brings you even. So you're playing all or nothing strategy. Well, congratulations, you're even. But if you played some blend of this and some balance in that, the more you win in this genie situation, the more you end up with at the end. In fact, that's all your profit. It's not the bank, it's the equity.
Yeah, it's really interesting to hear you say that, because I personally feel like if I have a minus 20%, minus 30% day, that's a win in my book. And it sounds weird to say a loss is a win, but it's like I'm living to see another day. I didn't get quite lucky today, or a guy got in foul trouble, or whatever the case may be. Or some days there's days where everything goes completely haywire, and I'm just like, dude, I'm so thankful that I got half of my money back, because this was a complete disaster kind of a day. So yeah. I say that, but to the way that you laid it out in that video, it just made a shit ton of sense to me, because I was like, yeah, man, if you're continually getting money back in your because I manage my bankroll on a similar system to poker with a buy-in system. The amount of my bankroll determines what levels I can play at, kind of a thing. So the longer I can stay at that level to get that shot to run hot, that bumps me up and helps me recoup my losses. I think that's, one of the most purest altruistic things, and one of the things that makes DFS tournament play amazing.
Yeah, for sure. If you like in those days where you let's say the 150 max entry, and let's say the buy-in's 1,000 for those, just to make up numbers. If you end up with like $1,200, like $200 profit, like you could have won that tournament. In golf, if you're in first place on Saturday, you could have won that tournament. If you're in first place in football at the first half slate of the games, and there's only 3 more games to go, like you could have won that. You could have won that tournament. Like there's a ton of variance in this, and you're gonna need a big bankroll.
So that's one of the things I wanted to get your insight on, because that's one of the things that I think ate me up the most the last couple months. Is week 4 of NFL was my best NFL day, and it was a 5-figure win day. But at one point at the very end of the games, and we're talking about a few passes at the end of the game, that was the game that the Rams and Buccaneers shot out of nowhere. A couple Jared Goff passes to Cooper Kupp versus Robert Woods or Brandon Cooks that I had. We're talking about the difference between a $12,000 day and a $35,000 day. And there was another baseball day. One of the best DFS players put out a tweet. I'm thankful for DFS because I won $50,000 last night. And that was in a $15 tournament. Well, I won the $8 tournament, scoring 10 points more. And I wanted to say to him, and I didn't say this to him, but I want to say, you should be grateful that I have a bankroll to play in that effing tournament, because I would have won it. So yeah. The thing that I struggle with, and I hear this a lot from other players, is as they're climbing up the ranks, hey, you know what, if my 75th lineup if that was in my top 20, I win the $4 or the $8 or the $10 today instead of, barely breaking even. So how do you reconcile the variance and those close calls and not eating yourself up with the woulda, shoulda, coulda of, man, or NBA stat corrections, just that last minute shit that's out of your control that is the difference between life-changing money and back to the grind?
I think you don't. I mean, I think you kind of deal with it. Like it does get easier. For me, it does. For some people, it might not. I mean, and I wouldn't blame them for it. Like, so like the first couple years, probably I was super concerned about getting that exact right lineup order, especially in MLB. Like, okay, I'm going to have 5 entries into the big one and then 20 entries into this one, and this one's going to be a 100K payout. And so I was really specific, and I kind of just gave up on all that, and it just doesn't bother me as much, if at all, anymore. And I think some success will do that too, obviously. Like, you're gonna be like, okay, well, it's not the end of the world. I did get lucky here and there. So, and that's easier said than done, right? So for someone who hasn't had a ton of success, I could completely understand where they're like, if I would have just moved this one up over there. But it's a lot of randomness. And with the amount of randomness guys use, it seems like guys using their process nowadays, your lineups are fairly random anyways. It's like, it's not like, and even projections are just an average. You know what I mean? They're not like 100% accurate, obviously, or none of us would make any money, or whoever came out with the best projections would make all the money. Right. So it's not even like the difference between your first lineup and your 50th lineup or 150th lineup. It's not like, oh, this is definitely the number 1 A lineup for sure here. You could be off. It doesn't mean you shouldn't still, try to apply the process the best you can and use ownership the way I kind of explain it in my videos and stuff like that. You should still be, doing that. And the closer you can get to accurate projections and accurate ownership, the better off you're going to be. But, you're going to have to accept the randomness in it. And you don't want to data mine and start changing your process based off of small sample sizes.
So like hindsighting?
Yeah, like hindsighting. The best way, I was actually going to do a video on this. Maybe I will. I heard it described years ago. Like, let's say you're going to write a book about roulette, a roulette table. And I'm sure you're familiar with roulette, right? It's got all the wheels spinning in the casino,
right.
and it's got 1 through 32 or 36, and 0 is how the house makes money, and then they added 00, so the house wins on 0 and 00, or at least that affects the odds of all the other numbers. Anyways, and you were trying to write a book on how to beat roulette, and you went into the casino and you just start writing down all the numbers, right? 9, then he rolls again, 36, and he rolls again, 0, and you just write out like 5,000 times. You go, okay, I got it. And you go home, you plug it into your Excel sheet, and you start writing your book. And it's like, yeah, well, 9 wins 37% of the time. You know, black wins on Wednesdays more frequently, right? And so, like, you know, it's a joke because we know that roulette is a game of luck, and each number is going to come up the amount of times that it's supposed to, and you're going to lose because the house has 0 and 00. But if you just replace those numbers with, like, athlete names, right, that's how everyone talks about DFS. That's how everyone talks in the sports sports radio world, right? Like, no, LeBron James on Wednesdays does this good, and when he's there, he does this good, and then they start changing all their approach. And like in PGA too is like, this is a big one where I see people talking about course history, and you know, you'd have to prove to me, and I'm open to believe it, that course history matters, but I can't see how it does. Like, the weather's different, the player's different. He might have had a kid then, or got married, or it's years ago. The pin placements are different. The courses are readjusted all the time, and it's by the way, a sample size of 3. You know, it's just the roulette table and then making up a book, right?
Right.
Well, and something to keep in mind whenever you're going through your process, in my opinion, is like, am I data mining? So like if you're using Fantasy Cruncher and you're using Lineup Rewind, and then you plug in all these groups and settings, and you go, oh, I would have binked if I just would have done this. It's like, be careful that you're not data mining here. Like, how many times have you used this process? Are the projections from the same source, the same way, the same day, especially in the NBA? It's like, I'm not saying lineup rewind can't be useful or lineup study can't be useful, but just be careful you're not data mining.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to get a false sense of confidence. I'm guilty of it. You know, I am many times over a lineup rewind millionaire. So
yeah, me too. You're not the only one.
So I want to touch a little bit more on some of the more fun things that DFS provides that a lot of us aspire to. So describe the conversation when either with yourself or with a friend or a family member where you hit your first major score, whether that's 5 or 6 figures, and you're just having that holy shit moment. This is surreal. This is incredible. This is the hard work paid off. I can't believe it. And also, are you feeling like you belong at that point, or is there a part of you that is like, well, I got to prove it again before I'm convinced that I'm as capable at this game as this indicates here?
Yeah, no, I still remember it. 5 years ago, I don't know how long it's been at this point, and it was due to Chris Paul in the NBA, and not because he was on my team, it's because he wasn't. The guy, I was in first place. It was the West Coast game, last game, up by a few points. Chris Paul pulls a hammy in the fourth quarter. It was a 20 max, I think, for 20 grand, something like that. And no one was there. It was just me by myself. I was texting my buddy, and he was like, holy shit. And I was like, super pumped. I don't get that pumped anymore. I probably should, but I was super pumped, and I was thinking like, okay, I'm back now. You guys are fucked. Right, I don't know if you could swear on here. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can. You can. This is
okay.
I'm pro free speech, so let it rip.
Okay. All right. Yeah. No, that's exactly what I thought. I'm like, you guys are in trouble because now I have a role, and I didn't have a role because I all my poker money was gone because I didn't have a job for a while after poker, and you're still burning through your monthly, still have a mortgage and car payment and stuff like that. So I'm like, okay, Insta roll, and then I like almost went busto like so many times after that. Like somehow I didn't though. Up and down, almost gone like down to like my last 1,000 or two, a bunch of times. But I never cashed in again. It was just my initial. Same with poker. Initial like $400, and DFS was like $800, and that was it.
So we exchanged a couple messages on Twitter about you're looking for video suggestions, and I said, hey, I love hearing other people's take on Bankroll Management. You said, hey, I'm not sure because I think my approach is a little bit unique. I would love to hear more about that.
Well, yeah, I think I have too much gamble in me, and I think honestly, I don't. It's weird. Like I'm not like the Brandon Adams, Empire Makers of the world, where those guys will gamble $5,000 on a putt anytime, anywhere type of thing. I'm not that crazy. I love just betting on sports and stuff like that, and just betting on stupid stuff with my friends in a non-competitive way. But it's just not real money to me, and I think that's just something gambling does to you. Is it changes the value of money, especially bankroll money. It's like it's not even real money. It still can hurt, but it just if I knew I was losing a mortgage on a house, a down payment on a house, I would it'd tear you up. But it's just not real money to me, to a certain extent. And so when I'll take some chances I probably shouldn't take, especially if I'm running hot. I like to push it, because like I said, I'm constantly adjusting what I'm doing, and I'm like, okay, maybe this is giving me that little edge over all these guys, where I should push it now, and then I could take, if you have a monster year, that could set you up for a while. And I'm not sure everyone else should do that. I don't know because I can't really give advice, because I think, not to sound like a jerk, but I think most players are probably losing players. So you shouldn't bet 10% of your bankroll on this and 20% on that, because you shouldn't be playing at all. And so I don't want to recommend someone to buy a stock that's a losing stock, that I knowingly know that's a losing stock. So that's why I was saying in my what GPPs to enter is if you're a losing player, just play a couple entries in a high payout event, and if you get lucky, get as lucky as humanly possible, right? And pay for your entire gambling career in one shot. Cash out 95% of it, and then bet sports, bet whatever for the next 20 years, and you'll be fine. And then everything else is just finding out whether you're not a losing player and how to go about that. Like I said, it could ebb and flow over time, which is another reason you probably shouldn't gamble like me, because if it changes and you're now a dog, you're going to funnel your bankroll to somebody else, And also what type of game? How am I supposed to know what you're good at? What if you're a good cash game player and you stink at GPPs? Well, then you shouldn't play GPPs, and you should just spend all your money on cash games, or vice versa. Maybe you shouldn't be playing cash games. How do I know if you're beating the $2 cash game, but you're going to get crushed after you get into where the pros can play? You just want to put yourself wherever the highest amount of theoretical dollars are coming back to you, whether that's not playing to the level where you're going to get called a pro by DraftKings and have to play in all the high dollar events. So you might want to consciously not play that much and stay in the lower dollar events and just win in $5-10 grand a year or whatever. You might want to just play cash games. I really can't tell you. That's the problem. I'm still thinking about it. I took your message and okay, I should think of something, but it's like I can't tell him. Like, what am I supposed to tell him? What do you think?
Yeah, it's a challenge, and that was one of the things that I struggled with because you look at the advice that's out there for DFS, and it's put 10% of your bankroll in play, 80-20 it, and it's like I think that's shit advice because some people's brains don't work in such a way where you play. I suck at cash games, but there's just something about GPPs that just like clicks with me, and I've tried numerous times to put together cash, and it's just like there's something weird to me about playing the most obvious plays, and it's just and there's a reason why I don't really bet sports that often because I just don't get much satisfaction of grinding out the 53-55% you need to beat the rake or the house or whatever. So I think that's a challenge, but I actually had to go to poker. I read a book, a poker book. I forget the author, but it was about building a bankroll. And he talks about how he basically started out with $200 and what he did at each level to run it up to 10 grand. And I was like, okay, that's something I can actually get behind. So if I start at the quarters and I play the quarters until I have X amount of profit, then I'll have enough buy-ins, 25, 50, 100 buy-ins, whatever the case might be. And then I'll play everything under $1. And that's pretty much what I've done. Sadly, it took about $500,000 of my DraftKings entry fees to get there, so I was not profitable for a few years. And by the time I figured it out, I think I've got 100 grand left before I have to move up to everything over 5. So, but yeah, I don't know the perfect answer, and I don't think you're a jerk at all by saying most players shouldn't play. You can't be a jerk at stating the facts. DraftKings and FanDuel, in their terms of service or before you enter a contest, there's an option to say who wins at this thing, and it says black and white 90% of the people at this thing lose. So I think if you're getting a 1099, that's a great place to start. And then I just think staying within your means, but what's the goal? Do you want to do this full time? I think the most dangerous DFS player is a guy with a day job. He can take more risks. He can take more chances. This last year I spent playing DFS for a living, just pretended if this the only thing I could do. It was the best year of my life until I hit a downswing, and it sucked to the point where now I'm taking on more consulting work outside of DFS hey, I'm going to need a bigger bank if I'm going to hang around this thing with the variance and the level of competition that I'm going in. So that's why I love asking the question. I just think there's so much nuance to it that it's going to come down to the individual deciding what's best for them.
That makes me think of two things. One is with where they say the 10% cash, whatever, there's a bunch of different advice out there. But 10% of your roll, 80% on cash or 20% on cash. It's like, okay, well, how would that work for a guy like me? I play all the sites. I know I'm kind of, there's not a ton of guys who do that, but like I can't even play all cash and all tournament. You know what I mean? So right. Like on DraftKings, I'm like 50-50 on playing the cash there just because I don't know if I can get all the lineups in with the late NBA news. Now in baseball and stuff like that, that's right. going to change. But in golf, I do everything. But like, so you can't just blanket statement that for sure because okay, now you're going to cost this guy a third of his 10% of his role because he doesn't upload in time when an NBA injury news is going, and he's got to adjust for cash and GPPs right. on two different sites or something like that.
Yep.
And it brings up the second point of I play cash if I don't have the time in the NBA.
Okay.
On Yahoo and Fantasy Draft because the rake is lower. Rake is huge. Rake, if there was no rake, you probably wouldn't have had your downswing. I don't know what your graph looks like, but like that's how important rake is. It's it's millions of dollars for the higher volume guys. It's tons more than poker ever was. So man, if you could, it sucks that Fantasy Draft doesn't have those 100K, to first very frequently. But man, not having to pay that rake is a bigger edge than anyone has. And you could see with Alex Baker's graph that he put on Twitter the other day where he was under 8% return on investment, which is excellent. But that's not as much as the rake, right?
Right.
That's including the rake. So he's up there in the 20-some% if you count for the rake. He would be making triple.
Right.
Triple what he brought home last year without that rake. So You think you're gonna beat the rake? Okay, then you're all right. If you think you could beat the rake, then you know what I mean. You wouldn't be listening to this. You'd be on your beach house in the Bahamas or whatever.
Well, it's funny. One of my friends that doesn't play DFS didn't understand the concept of rake, and my buddy was like, okay, let's look at this tournament. Let's look at the Millionaire Maker. Let's just assume it fills, and it's got a 15% rake. And my buddy's like, okay, I'm following you. It pays $1 million to first. It pays $100,000 to second. Do you know who's going to win the second most amount of money that day? And my buddy's like, yeah, the guy in second. And my buddy's like, no, wrong. DraftKings. They're making $150,000 on this one tournament. So
yeah,
they're taking second just for putting everything together for us. And you know, I come from, you know, a sales consulting background and a commission, and they have expenses and all of that. And I hope at least most casinos are very profitable from sports betting. So I'm hoping as the federal ban on sports betting, now that's been repealed, we're going to see it more in states become legalized. And I'm hoping they reinvest into their DFS players to bring down the rake. I don't know how that's going to work out. I know they're thinking about selling. So I just love playing the game, and that stuff is way out of my control. But I think it's smart for players to at least be thinking about, okay, you know, like for instance, this weekend on Yahoo, they have a no management fee game for the 2-game slate. That's the first thing I entered. Just max it. Because you're and sometimes when Yahoo has that guaranteed overlay, you know, you don't find overlay anymore, and that's also the small edges that some of these players that, hey, I'm barely profitable. What can I do to get a little bit more of an edge? I think that's a great place to look.
Yeah, and like I said in one of my videos too, contests to select. You know, if you go in there and you just click OK, well, okay, who was Mark Lovin in there? Who else was in that 6-man that you just entered? You know, if you could find 2 or 3 guys names you haven't seen before, it's like, okay, enter that one. You know, spend a little time, and the longer you stay alive, the more you have a chance to bank. If you're a GPP player, especially.
100%, yes. If you find something with, you know, you can afford the 20 max, and a lot of people only have single entries. You can see that stuff on DraftKings. You see that stuff on FanDuel. They don't have stars. They don't have badges. You know, I did an interview with Petty Theft over the summer, and he said, I just try to find stuff where I would consider myself the favorite to win. And I started there, and I think that's a great way to go.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, Brian, before we let you go, I wanted to do a couple rapid-fire questions from people that sent questions on Twitter. The first question comes from Chris. He says, what's the biggest process landmine that you've landed on that you think other people should know about to try to avoid it?
Okay, that's a pretty good one. Let me think here. One's coming to mind, but I want to think it through if there's not a better one. Well, I'll just use it. So I kind of briefly mentioned this earlier, is I feel like randomness is a little too much in vogue right now, where if we had perfect projections, like the DFS gods came down and gave us perfect projections, we would put no randomness on those, right? We would just win all the money. The reason we would use randomness is, one, kind of just to shuffle the lineups because we're not entirely sure where we stand, and to diversify a little bit. And also, especially in the NBA, but sometimes in MLB, when news comes in late, you need those 150 lineups like that.
Right.
And the only way to get that done is with some randomness on it.
Right. Yep.
So yes, you need some randomness, and there's some tricks in there too that randomness can be helpful for. But when you watch Manny Lower's show, and so he calls those 1% owned guys at the end of your lineups apple bottoms.
Right.
Have you ever heard him say that?
Yep.
And so I don't think inherently there's anything wrong with an apple bottom, like not inherently, theoretically. So let's say if for some reason you knew, again, the DFS gods come down and show all these lineups, if the 150th lineup had LeBron James for you as 1%, but he was 27% owned, it doesn't matter. That's still the 150th highest EV lineup, and you'd put it in there because the DFS gods told you. But that's probably not what's happening. So that's in theory. But in practice, what I think is happening is people are putting their randomness so high that they're probably getting a lot of those apple bottom guys that they should just get rid of. and I would have to look at your process and know exactly what you're doing to actually decide to determine that. But if you're using a ton of randomness, and I guess it depends on the sport and everything. But from what I see, people are using quite a bit, like 40 to 100. I would sort by. I mean, I don't want to give a blanket statement because it might hurt. It might not be helpful because I don't know exactly what everyone's doing, but you could sort by my projected and just get rid of some of those bottom lineups at the very least. Oh, how about this? Here's my blanket advice. If you're using randomness, be careful of what I just mentioned.
Okay.
That you're not putting in, that you're not pumping out some random negative EV type of lineups, because you think about it. You're putting a bunch of randomness on these numbers. Some weird stuff is going to happen, right?
Absolutely, and that's definitely happened to me. I think Osimo has talked about, he likes to run 1,000 lineups and start making his cuts. And in theory, the way that he can do it, and the reason he's comfortable sharing that, is because he's mastered it. When I try that, it's like without fail, I have Doug McDermott in my best lineup doing nothing but standing in the corner, and it's like this didn't work for me, and you got to be cautious with it. So. Awesome. The next question comes from Tom, and he says, do you change your style based on different GPPs, payout structures? If so, what is an effective way to do so? So I think you touched on this a little bit earlier with when you first started trying to mix in things perfectly. What are you doing now? Are you just letting the chips fall where they may kind of a thing?
Yeah, I'm letting the chips fall where they may, and I might adjust that in the future as the games get sharper. But I kind of feel... right now, and I could be wrong, this is my guess, that the ownership changing based on the amount of players in the tournament, in the GPP, and the buy-in as it goes up, the ownership changes, and it's usually the sharper plays have higher ownership. I think it kind of works itself out a little bit, where yes, the higher buy-ins will have higher ownership on the sharper players, but there's less players in that tournament. So they probably should have higher owned players. Does that make any sense to you?
Yeah, it does.
I think I think part of the reason why when you have a GPP with 100,000 people in it that the ownerships are so low is because you have 100,000 people in it.
Right.
So I'm not making that adjustment. I do enter strategically a little bit, but in my entire process, I think is what the question he's probably more or less getting at is, no, I don't right now, but that actually is something I'm thinking about. Here's another problem. It's like, okay, how in the NBA specifically, right? The NBA is the kind of the weird one of all the sports. You have to be as dynamic as possible. You have to be ready to change when the news comes.
Right.
And you have to late swap as well. But you have to be ready. You have to be dynamic as fast as possible to update everything you're doing. And if you do what I say, which is make your own projections, make everything your own, try to figure it out on your own, you're doing it all your own. You're not waiting for Osimo to update his stuff, right? So you have to if I add this element of adjusting even more so based on the GPP I'm at, is it gonna slow me down, right? Because I don't want to be sitting there with 150 dead lineups across every single GPP on DraftKings and just wanting to shoot myself in the head, like, why didn't I just put them in? Right. So if it's a give or take. So like I might think in a different sport, I might start applying that. And also the basketball season's already, halfway through. I'm doing good. I'm not going to change anything too. So I have a little bit of superstition left in me, but
Well, I think that's fair because if you're looking at take an NFL slate this weekend and you see the top two guys are projected, one's at 75%, one's at 50%, and you're not planning on playing either, you can pretty much do whatever you want at that point because your lineup's going to be unique.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. There's uniqueness and trying to figure out who's the higher EV play.
Right.
If you can figure that out, you're gonna be on a good path.
Well, that leads us to our next question. This comes from Chris, different Chris, and he basically is referring to the first video that you did on the ownership video. When you identify a guy in a great spot, he called him an auto profit player. His question is, when you find your pivot from the chalk that day and you're going to take a stand on the player that you like more, are you allowing the chalky player into your lineups at all, or is it pretty much somebody that you're not interested in playing because there's not a lot of value if he ends up doing well?
Yeah, so that goes along with what I was talking about with the randomness, where like I said, if the DFS gods gave us the exact projections of these people, but you still had to make 150 unique lineups, I guarantee you're going to get under the field, which I think is kind of what he's getting at here,
right,
on some of these chalkier players, right, but they'd still be in the top 150 of the perfect lineups. So like I think in theory you could be under, and I often am, and I trust what I'm doing, you know, and so I'm okay. So like today in golf, Sung J M was the highest owned guy. I was 11%. He was owning like 28% or something like that. So like that's fine. I'm fine with that. It's not like I didn't know that was going to happen. It was all planned out, you know, before time. And I think in theory, you know, and a lot of times think of it this way too, like the other day, there was like a million lineups when all the chalk died 2 days ago in the NBA. Like everybody stunk, right? Like all the good players, all the value players.
Yep.
There was probably a million lineup combinations that could have taken first that day. Right. And so, tons of those would have had chalk. You would have been fine with one of those dead chalk ones if you had all the other perfect ones too. So it's not just like one lineup wins and that's it. There's a ton of combinations available out there too. So like but again, back to the randomness thing. The way I do it, I'm not really in trouble of that happening. But the way other people do it, and if you're just blanketly putting a ton of randomness on there, you might get some weird leverage plays that you shouldn't too. So it's not just apple bottoms, because let's do this one day. Just take 100% randomness and run it 3 times, right? 150 lineups, then 150, and then 150, and look at the you know, with like 3 uniques or something like that, and then look at the plays. A lot of times you'll get like LeBron at 40%, and then in the next one 19%, and the next one 30%, right? And so like, how much skill are we having there, right? How much, you know, why don't you just throw some darts at the wall? You know what I'm saying? And so like if and I'm not saying don't use randomness, but like the theoretically, no. I don't care if there's a chalky player at 35% and I have 10% of them. The way I do it, I'm happy with that. And the way I'm seeing it online, I'd have to look at your process, but the way I'm seeing people talk about it online, I bet you could run into some problems with it. Yes.
Okay. I think that's fair.
Okay.
This question comes from Matt. How do you test a theory? You had mentioned that, you know, you don't necessarily spend time working on it. You just throw it live. And I'll expand on his question. How do you test it? And how much time do you allow before you're like, probably not the right path here?
I test it by gambling, but so let's say I come up with an idea, I'll run it through a stats program and I'll check the R on it. And so it depends on the sport and how high the R is. So in some of these sports, in my opinion, I could be wrong, an R of like even 0.2 or 0.3 could be super profitable, where in other sports like the NBA, an R of like less than 0.8 is garbage. Okay. So theoretically, and also there's different ways you could test. You could use a statistical program to test these things. So like in one of John Bale's books, he says the NBA, I think it was John Bale's, I don't want to call anyone out, in someone's book, they said the NBA line has no correlation to fantasy points, or a very small correlation. And that's not true. That's not right. If you stick points in one column, team total in one column, Vegas team total in one column, and then the actual fantasy points produced by the player in the other column, and you run in just a standard linear equation, you're going to get a low R. But there's other ways to do it. So like, you just have to be creative. And so like, anyways, the long story short is it depends on the R. So sometimes I'll get like nothing. Like I'll be like, oh, this is going to correlate perfectly. And it's like, wow, that was a complete waste of a day. I just wasted a day putting all this information into a sheet, and it has no predictive value at all. And so then once I piece all that together, and this is part of it about knowing the sport too, where I know enough. I don't watch sports anymore, but I still know all the players, and I still know, I've watched so much sports in my life. I know exactly, what's going on, how the sport's played and stuff like that. It helps building models. It helps in the process of daily fantasy. So like when I play soccer occasionally, and like I don't know these players' names. They have like 6 different names too, like Chicharito, Javier Hernandez, J. Hernandez, Hernandez with a bunch of Nyes on it. And so it's like if you don't know that type of stuff, it's going to hurt you. And so like if you come up with an idea and run some regression on it, and you don't know anything about the sport, you might just shove it in there. And it's like, man, you're comparing apples and oranges here. Anyone who's watched baseball for a second would know that. Right. Some things along those lines.
Perfect. That leads us into our next question from Shammy, and he wants to know what's in your toolbox. You just mentioned R. You talked about sheets. Are you using Python? Any type of data science in addition that you might be applying? As much as you're comfortable talking about, of course.
Yeah, no, it's okay. Yeah. They can have my initial spreadsheet too that I shared earlier. I did when I first started, I was like, okay, I'm not only am I going to crush in predicting, I'm going to learn how to code everything. I'm going to dominate every aspect of this. These guys won't know what hit them. But I kind of probably about, I don't know what year, maybe a year and a half into it, especially after I started building up a bankroll, I had that money and I'm going to have to pay taxes on it. I hired somebody. So I built my own website and then hired a coder to kind of get what I want done instead of having to figure it all out myself.
Smart.
And even though I have brothers who can code, it's just better to hire somebody else. And if I could give some advice on that, hire an American, because a lot of times people don't know Americana stuff that you would just assume they know, or not assume they know, but you need them to kind of know.
Right.
It speeds up the time. You work in the same time zone, right? So like if something breaks and it's an hour before lock, you're out of luck if your guy's overseas because he's sleeping.
Right.
But if he's in America, he should still be awake. It's going to cost you triple or more, but I would probably, and they complain a lot more. But I would hire American or Canadian and just pony up and pay it.
I had an executive assistant that was in the Philippines, and she was awesome. But there was a handful of stuff I would give her an assignment for the day, and then check back the next morning, and very little would be done. And just because I assumed that she knew some of the intricacies of baseball, that I was asking her to put into diagrams and stuff like that for me. So it's good advice. We got another question here. This comes from Thomas. He wants to know, not necessarily applicable to NBA with some of the last minute stuff, but before like a PGA or an NFL, are you plotting out like your path to victory, or is everything just strictly numbers based? I like this stack and I'm going to run it back with this core of running backs and tight end. Talk to us a little bit about, are you diagramming a path to victory, or is it everything just depending on ownership and projections?
Mostly ownership projections in most of the sports. In football, I will put more thought into it than that, because of the groupings, the need to group in football, at least in my opinion. I will try to look into who I think's more correlated that week, and who's less correlated. In attack. Well, I mean, from the math, my strategy is borne out. So like, I don't really have to think about that too much. I will tinker with it a little bit, 20% of the time, maybe.
Okay.
but not a ton. Like sometimes some things can be egregious, or sometimes it'll be like, like I can't play this guy. I cannot play this guy in 80% of my lineups and live through the night. Like, so like occasionally, I will. And sometimes too, it'll be like, okay, what this is pumping out here means I'm giving it, garbage in, garbage out. I'm doing something wrong. I have to go tinker again. I don't tinker with lineups though. That's when people say tinker, they're like, oh, I never manipulate data, right? That's another huge flaw. If you're manipulating data, like especially in lineup rewind, or if you're actually trying to build a model or use a statistical process, if you're messing with your data, you lost. It's over. Like you can't. I mean, unless like if you're messing with the data to kind of just get a thought in your head or something in lineup rewind, sure, fine. But if you're going to mess with data and then use it, that's not how this works. If you're messing with data, you're doing it wrong.
I think that's completely well said. And I think that, playing to your strengths also, if this is not a realm that you're comfortable in, I think trying to slap together a model, it can be a challenge. Like I'm not a computer guy. I have to lean on other resources to do well. And a lot of that is game theory focused type stuff. So I appreciate you getting into that. I think that touches a lot of bases for a lot of different backgrounds, because that's one of the other things too. I think various backgrounds can do very well at this game. So I appreciate you being very cordial and candid about that. Couple fun questions, and then we'll let you go.
All right.
Rank your DFS sports in terms of most profitable versus your favorite to actually build and dive in on.
Okay. My favorite sport, I'll add one in my favorite sport to sweat too. Is
okay.
PGA.
Yeah, perfect. Okay.
PGA is my favorite sport to sweat. It's probably my most profitable. I honestly don't know. It's between that and MLB, and then NBA is probably next after that. Probably for a dollar invested, it's probably MMA, but it's just because I got lucky. I haven't played it that much, and I banked a big one. So although I think I'm on the right path with what I'm trying to accomplish in there, I'm not sure yet. And what was the other category? So it's most profitable and most.
And what's your favorite sport to work on? So like I'm more profitable in baseball and basketball, but I absolutely love building football lineups.
Okay, I don't. Yeah, definitely. Football is my least favorite to build, and that's probably why I had a rough season on DK. Although it was good on the other sites, but yeah, football is definitely, for some reason, I don't know why. Just Sunday morning, I don't feel like it. Probably NBA is fun to try to come up with something and beat these guys. They're really good. These other players, they're really good, and they're tough to beat. And so it's fun having some success in the NBA. PGA, I've been number one for like 5 years now on the RG rankings, but I think Alex might have taken me. I think he won last week, so I gotta win this week to hold that on. But PGA is really fun. But people are getting better at PGA too, which stinks. So, but yeah, I love the fun thing about PGA. Here's another little piece of advice I could share is play the smaller sports, even if you don't like them. Like, I mean, if you're in this for money, anyways, you could probably figure out how to. You could probably play tennis DFS and make $100K a year, right now. Right, I would say it wouldn't shock me. You could probably play LOL. I don't know about LOL. No, maybe no. Yeah, you probably could. You probably make 20, 30, 40 grand in that. I have no interest, and that's good because a lot of the top players have no interest in spending time learning those games and trying to get better at them. So, if you could play those and somehow find out how to lower the rake, you're looking good. You can make some cash. And so the PGA had like this great balance of big prize pools, and a lot of the pros weren't playing it. So it was pretty profitable for a few years now. But now people are getting into it, and the models are getting a lot better. I thought the models were good. I didn't even use ownership percentages for the first 2-3 years because you didn't need them. Because if you made an accurate model, you're going to be leveraged in the right spots anyways. but now everyone's kind of just copying somebody who's like fairly decent. So, so NBA, then PGA probably. And MLB, MLB's up there too, man. MLB's fun to build. I like it. And that's always been my my favorite sport, and my favorite stat based research back in the day, sabermetrics and stuff.
Yeah, baseball is fun too because summers are kind of dead. Lineups are in hours before. You can take your time with it. You don't really have to worry about swapping too much. Yeah, it's
They always have at least 8 games playing, maybe 12. So there's a huge field. You don't have to do some stupid 2-gamer.
Oh yeah, and some days you get it in the morning and the afternoon.
Yeah, like 5 games in the morning and 7 games in the afternoon. Baseball's great DFS sport. They just need to get those West Coast guys to release the lineups a little bit earlier, another half an hour early. Maybe now that they're firing everybody, they'll put in some people.
Yeah, and then you have some of the teams that notoriously, when they go to the West Coast, like the Astros were terrible about this last year. Like
brutal.
Like, dude, you know who you're playing. Like, you guys are at the movies right now. You know who's starting. Just tell us so I can go do something else.
In their defense, they were trying to figure out how to cheat that whole time, so they couldn't release a lineup, and that takes time. Cheating. You can't just figure out how to cheat at a away stadium within 5 minutes and get that lineup out there.
Or at winning a playoff millionaire maker for that matter. I'm not getting into that. I'm not getting into it. I stay out of it. One last question before we go. Thank you so much. This has been absolutely incredible. I would love to do this again in the future. But before we let you go, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you, what is your best DFS moment?
Okay. Well, the first one that comes to mind, I guess, must be the best one. So I'll say I'm trying to think of a deeper one. It was PGA. I'll give you my favorite, my worst, and best. How about that?
Absolutely. Love it.
My best was PGA. My worst was PGA. My best was PGA probably like 3 years ago. I'm almost positive it was a major. I can't remember which one it was, but I think it was the Open, the formerly British Open. And I took first in the 5,300, ninth in the Millie Maker, and first in the 4,400.
Wow.
On the same day. And my worst was PGA, British Open. And 2 years later, Saturday night, I was second in the Millie. First, second, and third in the 5,000. I had first, second, and fourth, something like that. And I had like 90% of the money in my account. Sunday, end of the game, I lost on the day. I lost on the week.
Brutal.
Not those events. I mean, lost money. I lost my buy-in, like half of my buy-in. So I went from like 90% of the money, and that was the worst one.
Wow. Brian, thank you so much, man. I really, really appreciate this. I know the audience is absolutely going to love this and eat it up. Please let everyone know where they can find you, plug everything you've got going on. I think you're a tremendous asset to the DFS community, and I'm so thrilled that you're getting more public, because I think that a lot of us are going to benefit in a major way from what you're doing.
Well, I appreciate it. Thanks for having me on, and I appreciate the retweets and everything too. I don't have much. It's just Twitter, Brian Hooper __. And my my YouTube channel, you could search Bric75 or my name, Brian Hooper. I think it's the first thing that pops up.
And for those that don't know, we'll just say it anyway. Do you sell your lineups on Twitter?
No, I do not sell my lineups on Twitter. Yeah, I got that guy. That's twice, because I got him once. I got him banned. I think he had like 2,000 followers, and then he opened this new one. So I hopefully this one gets shut down too.
I'm so excited for the day that someone grabs one of my pictures from one of the sites I'm on and starts trying to plagiarize and pretend they're me. That's when I'll know I made it.
I should take it as a compliment. Right.
All right, Brian, thank you so much, man. Everybody that tuned in, thank you so much. We'll get this on all of the podcasting platforms, get it up on the YouTube. Brian, I'll send you the file if you want to put it up on your YouTube as well. I just really appreciate this, man. Major run good this weekend with PGA, NFL, the rest of the NBA season. And yeah, man, just keep crushing. I'm so thrilled. I've competed against you for years, and it's just awesome to see the success that you've had and to be able to now root for you in a more public arena. I'm pumped about it.
Hey, I appreciate it. Yeah, good luck to you. You'll turn it around.
Thanks, buddy. I'll talk to you soon.
Yeah, have a good one.